Hello, Captains! I'm Kato Genesis, and welcome to my Outpost Guide Series for Starfield. This entry-level guide includes a step-by-step to get you set up with a practical mining outpost, including extractors, power, wiring, as well as my excessive storage solutions to your rapidly filling cargo hold. If you are experienced with outpost building and somehow ended up here, there might be a couple useful tips for you still, but even if not, please share your knowledge below, as any other captains happening by might find it useful too. Let's get started. When your first ship, the Frontier, gets handed to you, the cargo bay will have a starter kit's worth of ready-to-use resources to set up an outpost. You can check the Frontier's cargo with the ship section of your menu, or the little terminal in the ship's cockpit, just to be sure you have the resources that we'll need. On screen now are the resources we'll be using for this step-by-step. I'll be basing what we need off of the starting materials you get anyway, but if for any reason you're missing some of these resources, you can buy them from the resource tab of general goods shops, like the distribution center in the commercial district of New Atlantis. Before placing down an outpost beacon, we obviously need a suitable spot to build. For this first outpost, we're going to want a planet or moon rich in the resources that are useful for any outpost: aluminum, iron, helium-3, or at least 2 of these things. For the sake of ease, I've picked a moon for us that has all 3, and it's in a system that should be familiar because it's the one we start the game in. The moon we're traveling to is called Androphon, and it's orbiting Sumati in the Nerion system. While you're viewing a planet or moon, you can bring up the resource view to see what you have to work with. In Androphon's case, you'll see big blobs of iron and aluminum with some bordering helium-3. You'll notice, however, when you select different landing zones that iron and aluminum show up in separate biomes. Iron is in the mountains and aluminum in craters. It is possible to land in between biomes and find that perfect line, but for now, we'll start by picking just an aluminum landing zone first. Proceed with your selected landing zone, and we can get to the fun part. Upon landing in a resource-rich area, you should be able to spot an aluminum zone with your scanner quickly enough. By pressing your reload button while your scanner is active, you'll be able to place your outpost beacon. This mode will also show what resources the build zone will have available in the upper left-hand side of the screen. After you have found a suitable spot, press your activate button to put the beacon down, and it'll throw you directly into the build menu. Also, if this was a concern, as long as your first outpost is within 250 meters of your ship, build mode will have access to all the materials both on your person and in your cargo hold. I wanted to make a quick mention here too that outside of build mode, you can delete or rename your outpost by going to the beacon itself. Holding the reload button will ask to delete the outpost, refunding all materials, while tapping reload will bring up the rename box. I tend to rename outposts according to their main resource, as it helps me keep them organized. You can also hold your activate button while you're looking at the beacon to go back into the build menu, or use the scanner method from anywhere in the outposts area. So, we're back to where we left off in the build menu and about to place our first extractor. To make things easier to see for all of us, we'll be using the fly cam view for most of this, which you'll see as one of the many buttons on the bottom of the build interface. When you're in build mode, the first page will only show extractors that are usable in the outpost beacon's range. In my case, it's beryllium, helium-3, and aluminum. Of course, we know what the priority resource is for now, so we'll put down an aluminum extractor on top of the aluminum zone, which costs some iron, tungsten, and aluminum to build. Depending on how big the resource zone is, you can place multiple extractors provided they're spaced out, but we'll just start with one. In case you're wondering, extractors all work the same way. The only real difference is the material cost when you're building solid, liquid, or gas extractors. We've got our extractor ready to go, but it doesn't operate on magic, and you'll see on the readout at the bottom of the screen how much power your outpost needs in red. If we go to the second page in the build menu, we'll be at the power section. Power options are based on the environment that you're in, and this spot has no wind, sadly, so our current option is solar arrays and fuel generators. For simplicity's sake, let's place down a solar array at the cost of some beryllium, aluminum, and copper. Once our power source is built, the game seems to imply that the power is distributed automatically, but I don't fully trust it myself. To ensure that power is going where it needs to go, we can go straight to wiring. tap the button that says Modify Mode below, then hover over your power source and hold Activate. This opens a small context menu that will say Wire. Press Activate again and you'll be able to run a wire to whatever you want. Move it to the extractor, press Activate again, and your extractor now has constant power. If you ever need to remove a wire, you can simply hover over the wire itself in Modify Mode and hold your reload button to delete it. There is a switch available in the Power tab as well, and if you wish for more manual power control, you can place one of these switches down, run the wire from the power source to the switch, and then from the switch to the extractor. As long as power is provided in some way, the extractor will keep gathering resources until its onboard storage fills up. While we have the basic resources we need to get started, solid storage containers require manufactured components to build, and we'll need adaptive frames specifically to build them. In order to make these, we'll go to the crafting page of the build menu and put down an industrial workbench, which costs some iron and aluminum. When we exit the build menu and go into the industrial workbench, in a convenient turn, the adaptive frames cost iron and aluminum to make too. Adaptive frames will be in demand a lot, especially for storage, so see about memorizing the need for this component, and let's make 9 of them for now. Now that we have some adaptive frames, we can now finally move on to the convoluted world of storage. We'll start by finishing the main goal of this step-by-step and set up a storage for our extractor. On the third page of the build menu, there are 3 types of resource containers: solid, liquid, and gas. Odds are you'll be using the solid storage containers the most, so we'll be placing one of those down first. The storage in the extractor itself is only 10 mass, while the basic solid storage is 75 mass. And just so you know, you can get bigger resource storage later with ranks of the Outpost Engineer skill. Now that we've placed our solid storage down, we could manually grab materials out of the extractor and place them in the solid storage, but we don't need to thanks to a little function you might have seen in the Modify mode called Output Link. So in Modify mode, you can start an output link by hovering over an extractor and pressing the binding that says Output Link. Doing this, you'll now have a little dotted line to connect to something else. Pull this over to your solid storage and press that button again to create an output link to that container. This link will now automatically move the extracted ores directly into your solid storage. You can daisy chain storage containers together with the output link too, which should fill the container at the end of the chain first, then move up the chain until all of them are full. The output links, of course, work for all extractors, but if you're harvesting a gas like helium-3, you'll need to connect an output link to a gas storage instead, but that's the only real difference. We're not done with storage solutions just yet, because I want to help you get past the clunk of Starfield's inventory and menu systems. And I am crossing my fingers that some of this gets streamlined in the future. But assuming it doesn't, we'll take our remaining adaptive frames and place down another solid storage near our ship. We'll get back to that container in a moment, because this is where things are going to get a little silly, as I've got at least 3 methods of moving items off your ship. We'll start, of course, with the clunkiest way. So first, and the slowest, the most manual way to access cargo is to go up the ramp into the cockpit of your ship, access the cargo terminal on one of the walls, and grab all the items manually. This is tedious, and you shouldn't have to do it this way. The second way, provided that you're within that 250 meter range of your ship that I mentioned earlier, is that you can go into your character menu, select the ship section, and press the button down below that says cargo. So long as you stay within this range, you'll be able to move things between your character and your ship. This is good in a pinch, but still tedious when moving items to your outpost containers. As for the third way, this is the universal solution that I landed on once I could finally tell what the heck the menus were doing. Running with the idea that your ship is within that 250 meter range, instead of going on board or going in the menus, access your solid storage container outside with the transfer option. This shows the inventory view of the container itself, which is currently empty, as expected. You might have known this already, but pressing the inventory hotkey down below switches to your own inventory, and you can go down to the resources tab, and the store all resources button will appear to store all the solid resources that you're carrying. If you look at the inventory hotkey now, however, you might notice that it has changed to your ship's name. In this case, Frontier. So if you press it, you'll now be looking at your ship's cargo, but from the storage containers menu still. And if there's any confusion, it should show your ship's name at the top left of the screen. From here, select the Resources tab, and this button down below will say Take All Resources instead. Press it, and despite appearances, this will pull as many solid resources from your ship that it can directly into solid storage. This is likely to fill it up too, depending on how much you were hoarding. So again, from the top, look at your storage container and select the transfer option. Press the inventory key twice to switch to your ship, go to Resources, and hit the Take All Resources button. Clunky as this method still is, it saves us walking back and forth from the cockpit at least. There is one final object that ties all the containers together, called the transfer container. It takes iron, tungsten, and lubricant to make, and its description says that it allows transfer of cargo while on board your ship. So the main feature of the transfer container is just that you can switch to it when you access your cargo hold. Due to what I just showed you though, that aspect isn't very impressive. The main advantage the transfer container has in my mind is that it holds anything, not just specific resources, and its capacity is 200 instead of the 75 that the basic solid storage has. With the wizardry that we learned with both the output links and the cargo transfer trick, let's empty out the solid storage we moved stuff to and place the solid storage next to the transfer container. And we might as well place another on top. We can then run an output link from the transfer container to the solid storage and chain that to the other solid storage. Now we can access the transfer container, switch to the ship's inventory like before, go to the Resources tab, and once again select Take All Resources. What this should do in one smooth motion is fill up the transfer container and move all the solids over to the solid storage as soon as you exit the transfer container. Of course, the transfer container is only 200 capacity, so you may have to do this multiple times if you're moving over 200 mass worth of things off your ship. This is just a small scale example with solid storage, but once you have gas, liquid, and warehouse storage too, you can create as many output links from the transfer container to help you offload more efficiently. In other words, we just made a basic filing system for your resources. Having a landing pad for your ship this early is fairly optional, but it is nice to ensure your ship stays nearby if you're making frequent trips to this outpost. In the miscellaneous section of your build menu, you'll find two options for landing pads, the small square one and the ship builder landing pad. Early on, the small one is all you'll need, and it only requires iron and aluminum to build anyway. Keep in mind though that this landing pad is made for small ships, 40 meters in size. You can check your ship's size by looking at the axes underneath it in the ship menu. If your ship decides to land outside your outpost, it might be time to upgrade to a ship builder landing pad instead. If this is going to be a main outpost, there's no reason why you shouldn't get a ship builder landing pad anyway, since you can modify and build ships on it too. Now that you've got the basics down and you have more aluminum extracted, you can tear your outpost down, refund those materials, and go out and find an iron blob next. Before you do though, remember when I mentioned that you can build in between biomes? If your min-max senses tingling, you can pick a landing spot as close to the line between mountains and craters that you can find. If you get lucky, this is the landscape on Anderfon you'll see. The gray area is mountains, the red is craters. These will form a clear line to follow along until you locate the aluminum, iron, and helium-3 in one spot. It might take you multiple landings and some patience to find one, but I think it's worth it if efficiency is your thing. Now I would like to hear from you. Outposts are arguably the most complicated system of the game, so please leave a comment below if anything outpost related has you stumped or curious on how it fully can be utilized, because I do plan to cover some intermediate and advanced stuff too, so be on the lookout for those. If you're not tired of me just yet and want more Starfield, maybe give my tips and tricks or other guides a look. If you found this guide useful, entertaining, or both, please do whatever it is you see fit to show that. Among the things you can is by supporting on Patreon like the amazing patrons on screen now, including Wasteland Legends, Rose, and Sven. Thank you so very much for watching. I am Kato Genesis, and I hope to see you among the stars.